In this video, I'm going to be going over 4 broad tips for acing a software engineering interview. Hey there, my name is Khan and I've spent the last 6 years as a software engineer working at various companies like Google, Sony, and a small startup. I'll be condensing the best interview tips that I know down to 4 based on my interview experience as a candidate as well as an interviewer at Google. These tips are ordered by importance, so start at the top and work your way down if you're interviewing soon. Let's dive into it. So tip number 1. This one is really simple. There was an internal document at Google that outlined the single biggest indicator for interview success. Can you guess what it was? Preparation. Seems rather obvious, but you'd be surprised. You might be the type of person who over-prepares for their interviews, but not everyone is this way. I've come across candidates who have no issues showing up unprepared. This is the thing that weeds out most candidates during the screening phase. Don't let this happen to you. Show up having done your preparation, research a bit about the company, understand their hiring process, cater your interview prep to their hiring process. Spend a few days up to weeks, depending on how much time you have, to brush up on knowledge required for the job. It goes without saying, but preparation is really the key for making everything else in the process much smoother. Okay, let's move on to tip number 2. Okay, so tip number 2 is to cultivate genuine curiosity. By being curious about the problem you're solving, you actually perform much better in interviews. Here's my favorite hack for cultivating genuine curiosity and learning to enjoy the process of interviewing. A lot of people dislike being judged and assessed. That's completely understandable. But don't let your relationship with interviews end there. It doesn't have to be this way. Tech interviews can be quite enjoyable if you learn to see them differently. I learned this from my music experience of all places. Let me explain. A job interview has one common element to performing in front of an audience. You feel like you're being judged and assessed. And the way you get over this in music performance is to A, prepare, and B, understand the intent of the audience. Well, first of all, it's impossibly difficult to feel good about a performance if you're underprepared. So you have to first start with preparation. See tip number 1. However, once you're adequately prepared, then understanding the intent of the audience becomes key. For a music performance, the audience is there to be entertained. They actually don't care to judge or assess you at all. They just want to be entertained. They want to be relieved of boredom. It's the same exact thing in interviews. They actually don't care to judge or assess you. It's just what they have to do as part of the process. What interviews really want is to be shown why you're a great fit on the team, and they want you to succeed. They want to be relieved of having to interview yet another candidate. And to do this successfully, you just need to embody the characteristic of a great engineer. Genuine curiosity about the problems you're solving. A musician's craft is to evoke emotion in their playing. An engineer's craft is to investigate, understand, and solve complex problems. The best indicator that suggests someone will be really good at this is to see whether they actually enjoy problem solving or not. The interview is just a proxy to get this insight beyond just assessing your technical capabilities. Here's how to cultivate genuine curiosity. When tackling new problems and doing mock interviews, ask yourself these questions. Why is this the way it is? What's interesting about this problem? What solutions are most interesting? And why? The point of practice problems is not to simply finish practice problems. Grind lead code is not necessarily bad advice, but it is shallow advice. The reason why you do more problems is so that you can understand the nature of these problems, not so that you can get through more problems. And by understanding the nature of these problems, you become a better problem solver. But you can't get better at this while hating the problem solving process. You can't become a great musician without enjoying the playing. You can't become a great artist without enjoying the drawing. You can't become a great engineer without enjoying problem solving. The fast path to better interviews is to program yourself to be more curious. Try to solve problems for the sake of understanding them, not for the sake of arriving at a solution. If you focus on the understanding and not your score for whether you got this right or not, then everything else will fall into place. Not to mention, when you're curious, it actually comes out really positively in your nonverbal communication. You'll be a lot more relaxed, you'll be more creative, and you'll ultimately perform better. Tip number 3 is to have one technical challenge that you've previously faced that you can dive really deep on. I'll give you my example. At my job at Google, I implemented this mechanism for providing feedback on all the help articles. Seemingly simple, but there was an iceberg of complexity here. So let me explain how this works. As you hovered over the right side of the article content, a blue region would pop up indicating that you can leave feedback, by clicking on the button. The first problem was that the article content was unstructured HTML. The content was fetched from a content management system, and there were hundreds of teams writing help articles for different products. It had to be performant as to not slow down the browser performance. The element detection would have to happen as the mouse moved, which would get fired every animation frame. I had to help design and suggest a mobile-friendly interaction. No mouse meant we had to come up with an entirely new pattern that'd get the job done. And let's not forget about accessibility. How would we implement this pattern for keyboard users and screen reader users? This was arguably the most complex part of this, since those two use cases also don't involve the use of a mouse. We had to again implement an entirely new user interaction pattern for this as well. Now, I could dive into all of the implementation details, but I'll spare you the time. The point is, I remember the specific problems that I faced and the solutions that I came up with. Knowing these specific details is everything when an interviewer asks you, what technical challenges have you recently faced? Armed with the right answers, this interview question can become your new favorite. Okay, so tip number 4. This is an overlooked aspect of software engineering interviews. You have a unique background. You have a unique history. Learn to tell a good story around it. If you need a framework to go off of, Google the hero journey and simplify it. It doesn't need to be detailed, but you want to follow a proven story structure to tell the interviewer about your experience. Here's the version that I like because it keeps things nice and simple. Step 1, introduce the hero. Step 2, introduce the problem. Step 3 is the quest for an answer. Step 4 is a failure. This is optional. And step 5 is the solution or success. And step 6, how the solution brings you to today. You want to keep this under 2 to 3 minutes, and here's the condensed version of mine that I could use in interviews. My name is Khan. I graduated from California State University, Long Beach with a degree in music performance. I got a job in customer service after graduating since it would give me stable employment, but little did I know how stressful it would be. I quickly got burnt out. That's when I was introduced to coding. I love the potential for being able to create technology with my own hands. I'd like to say I instantly fell in love, but it was actually harder than I realized to get better. I would get home after a long day of work and wouldn't have the energy to focus. I eventually figured out that I had to take my career to the next level, so I applied to a coding bootcamp. I picked an end date to quit my job and spent my nights and weekends dedicated to learning the craft. I spent a rigorous 3 months at the bootcamp continuing to hone my skills. The bootcamp offered to hire me because I loved helping others so much. I stayed there for 2 years as a mentor. I then went on to work as an engineer at Sony, Google, and then a small startup in the gaming payments space. I'm now looking for my next adventure, which brings me to today. This story is just one example, and it's not that captivating, but it takes the interviewer through a simple story arc. And that's what you want, an arc that brings you to today. Once you draft this story, rehearse telling it. There's a bit of a performance you have to put on, but it makes the world of a difference for starting off the interview on the right foot. And those are my 4 favorite tips for software engineering interviews. If you enjoy this, give me a like and check out my coding career newsletter, where I break down how to be a better engineer and an adept problem solver. I'll leave a link to the newsletter in the description below. My goal in creating these videos is to help aspiring software engineers like yourself break into industry. So I really appreciate you taking the time to watch the video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.